Successful young man returns to the village where he was born, and what he does shocks everyone. Michael Thomas Reynolds felt his heart racing as the luxury car traveled down the dusty road leading to Palmview Village in the countryside of Louisiana. 15 years had passed since he left, with just a backpack on his shoulders and the promise that he would return rich to save his family from poverty. But when he spotted the hunched figure of a woman selling water bottles by the roadside under the scorching sun, his world came crashing down. It was his mother, Mrs. Dorothy, the same woman who had worked day and night as a seamstress to save up the bus fare that took him to New York City. The driver slowed down, and Michael noticed the residents starting to gather around the vehicle. Some pointed at the imported car with curiosity. Others whispered among themselves. But he couldn't take his eyes off his mother, who raised her weary gaze toward the car without showing any sign of recognition. "Stop right here," said Michael with a choked voice. When he got out of the car, the noise of their conversations ceased. A heavy silence fell over the small crowd. Michael walked slowly toward his mother, who watched him with the same distant expression she gave any potential customer. "Good afternoon, ma'am. How much for the water?" Mrs. Dorothy held up a bottle with her calloused hands. $2, sir. It's ice cold." Michael extended a $50 bill, but she shook her head. "I don't have change for that much." "You can keep the change." The woman studied him suspiciously. At 68 years old, Mrs. Dorothy had learned to be wary of excessive generosity. "What's this about? No one gives a $48 tip for a water." Michael felt tears welling up. His own mother didn't recognize him. The scrawny boy who had left had turned into a man in an expensive suit, with a well-groomed haircut and an elegant posture. But inside, he was still the same son who dreamed of one day being able to provide comfort for his family. I know this village. I was born here. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. Before Mrs. Dorothy could respond, a voice cut through the air like a blade. "Michael Thomas Reynolds." Everyone turned to see a woman around 40 years old, approaching with firm steps. It was Jennifer, his older sister, and the expression on her face showed no joy. "It's really him, everyone," shouted Jennifer to the growing crowd. "The ungrateful son who disappeared into the world and left his family in misery." Mrs. Dorothy dropped the water bottle. Her eyes widened as she examined the man's face in front of her. My son?" Michael took a step toward his mother, but Jennifer stepped between them. "Don't you dare!" She pointed an accusing finger. 15 years. 15 years without a word, without sending a single penny, while our mother worked herself to death. "Jennifer, I can explain." "Explain what?" Jennifer's voice echoed throughout the entire village now. "How you left promising you would improve our lives and never showed up again. How Dad got sick waiting for you to return and you didn't even come to the funeral." The silence that followed was deafening. Michael felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. His father had passed away, and he hadn't even known. "Dad, when?" 3 years ago, Jennifer replied bitterly. 3 years waiting for his son to show up. He died calling your name. The crowd began to murmur. Michael could hear fragments of conversations. Always knew he was no good. Abandoned his family. Now he shows up with all this money. A man around 35 years old stepped out from the crowd. It was Robert Johnson, who had been Michael's best friend in childhood. Now he was clearly a respected leader in the community, judging by how the others positioned themselves behind him. "Jennifer is right," said Robert with a firm voice. "You left and forgot where you came from. Your mother had to sell even her embroideries to pay for your father's medicine in recent years." Michael looked around and saw only hostile faces. The village that had once been his home now rejected him like an intruder. "You don't understand. I didn't forget. "Then why did you never send money?" interrupted Robert. "Why did you never call? Why is your mother here selling water in the sun while you drive around in that fancy car?" Michael took a deep breath. He knew that moment would come, but he hadn't imagined it would be so painful. "Because I couldn't." "Couldn't or didn't want to," retorted Jennifer. "I couldn't." Michael raised his voice for the first time. "Do you think it was easy? Do you think I didn't want to come back?" Mrs. Dorothy, who had remained silent watching the discussion, finally spoke. "Then why didn't you come back, my son?" His mother's question, asked with a broken voice but without accusation, disarmed Michael completely. He knelt on the dusty road, not caring about his expensive suit. "Because I ruined everything, Mom. Because I did something terrible and didn't have the courage to face you." Robert crossed his arms. "What terrible thing?" Michael hesitated. He knew the truth could destroy any chance of reconciliation for good, but he couldn't live with the weight of the lie anymore. "I sold our family's secret." A murmur of confusion ran through the crowd. Jennifer shook her head. "What secret? What are you talking about?" "Grandpa William's remedy recipe, the elderberry and honey syrup our family made for generations." Silence returned, but now it was different. It was a silence of shock and understanding. Everyone in Palmview Village knew the Reynolds family story. Michael's great-grandfather, William, had created a special recipe for a natural syrup that cured coughs and respiratory problems. For decades, the family sold the product in the region, helping both to support the household and treat the neighbors. Mrs. Dorothy brought her hand to her chest. You sold your great-grandfather's recipe?" "Mom, To whom?" Robert's voice was filled with indignation. "To whom did you sell our tradition?" Michael stood up slowly, brushing the dust from his knees. "To a laboratory in New York City. They discovered I knew the formula and offered me a lot of money." "How much?" asked Jennifer coldly. $500,000, several residents gasped. It was more money than most of them saw in their entire lives. "And where is that money?" continued Jennifer. "Why is our mother selling water if you received $500,000? Michael looked at the ground. That was the hardest part to explain. "Because I lost it all." Robert laughed bitterly. "Of course. Spent it all and now come back here pretending to be sorry." "No." Michael raised his head. "I lost it because I was tricked. The guy who offered me the money was a scammer. He took the recipe and disappeared. I got nothing." "That's a lie," said Jennifer. "You're making up this story to play the victim." "I can prove it." Michael went to the car and returned with a folder. "I have all the documents, the court case, everything." Robert took the papers and began to examine them. He had studied accounting in a nearby town before returning to manage the Village Residents Association. "This looks real," he murmured after a few minutes. "There's even a police report." Michael felt a moment of relief, but he knew that didn't change the fundamental issue. "Even so," said a new voice in the crowd, "you sold our tradition for money." It was old Mr. Jenkins, a 70-year-old man who had been one of Michael's father's best friends. His opinion carried weight in the community. "You're right, old Mr. Jenkins. I was wrong, but I had a reason." "What reason justifies selling our family's soul?" asked Mrs. Dorothy, with tears in her eyes. Michael knew the moment for complete truth had come. "Because I was desperate, Mom. I hadn't been able to find a job in New York City for months. I was living on the streets, eating scraps. And I couldn't come back here like that defeated. I couldn't disappoint you." Jennifer shook her head. "You preferred to betray us rather than admit you had failed." "I thought it would work. I thought with the money I could start a business, get truly rich, and then come back here as the successful son you deserved." Robert returned the documents. "But it went wrong. Everything went wrong. And when I realized I'd been tricked, I didn't have the courage to come back. How could I look my father in the eye and tell him I'd sold Grandpa William's recipe for nothing?" Old Mr. Jenkins approached and put his hand on Michael's shoulder. "My son, your father died of a broken heart, not because of the recipe, but because you disappeared. He said every day, 'My boy is in trouble, I can feel it. He doesn't call because he can't, not because he doesn't want to.'" Michael broke down in tears. The entire weight of 15 years of guilt and regret came out at once. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Mrs. Dorothy slowly approached and touched her son's face. "You're here now. That's what matters." "No, Mom. I came here to make things right, but it's already too late. The recipe is lost. Dad is gone." "The recipe isn't lost," said a weak voice from the crowd. Everyone turned to see a very elderly lady being supported by two younger women. It was Miss Elizabeth, 86 years old, the sister of Michael's great-grandfather. "What do you mean, Miss Elizabeth?" asked Robert. The elderly woman smiled. "You think William was a fool? He never taught the complete recipe to anyone. He always kept a secret, a special measurement only he knew." Michael approached his great-aunt. "You know the real recipe?" "I do. And not just that one, but 3 other formulas my brother created and never taught anyone. I was waiting for the right moment to pass them on." A murmur of excitement ran through the crowd. If Miss Elizabeth really knew secret recipes, that could change everything for the village. Jennifer, however, remained skeptical. "And why did you never say this before?" "Because I was waiting. My brother told me before he passed that the recipes should only be revealed when the family went through a great trial and was reunited again." Mrs. Dorothy looked at Michael. "The trial was us, living in hardship, and now we are reunited again." "Not everyone," corrected Michael sadly. "Dad isn't here." "Yes, he is," said Miss Elizabeth firmly. "He's in your heart, my boy, and I know he would forgive you because a father's love never ends." Robert, who had observed the entire conversation, finally broke the silence. "Even if these recipes exist, it doesn't change the fact that Michael sold our secret." "You're right," agreed Michael, "but I want to make up for it. I didn't come here just to ask for forgiveness. I came to return what is ours." "What do you mean?" asked Jennifer. Michael went to the car again and returned with a second briefcase. "In the last 5 years, after I managed to get back on my feet in New York City, I hired lawyers to try to recover our recipe. And I succeeded." He showed the documents to Robert. "The con man was arrested and the lab that was using our formula was forced to pay compensation. $500,000, with interest, became $1,200,000. The crowd fell completely silent. "And where is this money?" asked Robert suspiciously. "In a bank account in the name of the Palmview Village Residents Association." "I brought all the documents to transfer to you all." Robert took the papers with trembling hands. It was really true there were $1,200,000 in the association's name. "But why didn't you keep the money? It was rightfully yours." Michael shook his head. "It wasn't mine. Never was. The recipe belongs to our family, to our community. I only sold it out of desperation, but the money was always yours." Jennifer began to cry. "Michael, I thought you had abandoned us out of greed." "I abandoned you out of cowardice, sis, for not having the courage to face my failure, but I never stopped loving you all." Mrs. Dorothy hugged her son. My boy has come back." Old Mr. Jenkins wiped his eyes. "Your father would be proud. You made a mistake, but you did right in the end." Robert still looked at the documents unbelieving. "Michael, do you know what this money means for our village? We can pave the streets, improve the school, bring in a doctor. You can do whatever you think is best. It's yours." Miss Elizabeth approached, leaning on her cane. "So the time has come. I'll teach the true recipes to all of you. We'll make our village prosper with dignity." The crowd began to stir with excitement. For the first time in decades, they glimpsed a promising future, but Michael raised his hand, asking for silence. "There's one more thing I need to tell you." The atmosphere grew tense again. Jennifer looked at him worried. "What else?" "I didn't come just to return the money. I came to stay." "Stay?" asked Mrs. Dorothy. "Yes, Mom, I'm tired of New York City. I'm tired of the life I built there. I want to come back home if you'll have me." Robert studied him carefully. "And what would you do here? There are no jobs in your field." "I want to help develop the village. With the compensation money and Miss Elizabeth's recipes, we can create a natural products cooperative. I have experience in administration now. I can help organize everything." "You'd leave your life in New York City for that?" asked Jennifer incredulously. "Sis, I don't have a life in New York City. I have an empty apartment, a job that consumes me, and no real friends. This is my home. The people I love are here." Old Mr. Jenkins approached. "Son, coming back home isn't that simple. You've grown, you've changed. The village has changed too. You might feel out of place." Michael smiled for the first time since he'd arrived. "Mr. Jenkins, in New York City I always felt out of place. This is where I belong." Miss Elizabeth tapped her cane on the floor. "Enough talk. The boy is back, he's sorry and wants to help. Let's give him a chance." "But the decision isn't just ours," said Robert. "The whole village needs to agree. Let's have a meeting tomorrow night. Everyone votes." Michael nodded. "That's fair. Where can I stay until then?" Mrs. Dorothy held her son's arm. "In your home, of course. Your room is exactly as you left it." Jennifer hesitated, but ended up smiling. "All right. But you'll have to prove you've really changed. I'll prove it every day if you let me." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. The crowd began to disperse slowly, but many still whispered among themselves. Michael's arrival had shaken structures that seemed established for years. Mrs. Dorothy led her son into the small three-room house where he had grown up. The place was more run down than Michael remembered, but his mother had kept everything clean and tidy. "Sit here, my son. I'll make some coffee." Michael looked around the living room. The same floral curtains, the same patched sofa, the same old television. The only difference was the absence of his father. "Mum, tell me how Dad spent his last years." Mrs. Dorothy stopped in the middle of the kitchen. "Are you sure you want to know?" "I need to know." She sighed and returned to the living room. "Your father never lost hope that you would come back, even when we had no money. Even when he got sick, he always said, 'Dorothy, our boy is fine. He'll come back when he can.'" Michael felt a tightness in his chest. What was he sick with? Diabetes. But he couldn't afford medicine every month. Sometimes he got better, sometimes worse. In the end, his kidneys gave out. "Mum, why didn't you look for me? I had a phone, an address." Mrs. Dorothy lowered her eyes. "Your father wouldn't allow it. He said if you weren't calling, it was because you were struggling too. He didn't want to bother you." Michael buried his face in his hands. His father's generosity, even in poverty, made his guilt hurt even more. "How did you survive after he passed?" "Jennifer helps as much as she can. She works at the school in the neighboring town. And I sell water here by the road, do some sewing." "Mom, this is going to end. I swear to you, this is going to end." Mrs. Dorothy smiled and stroked her son's hair. "You've already done your part, dear. You brought hope back to our village." That night, Michael barely slept. Every creak of the house, every familiar sound of the countryside at dawn transported him back to his childhood. But it also reminded him of how much time he had lost. In the morning, he woke to the smell of coffee and tapioca. His mother was already preparing breakfast. "Good morning, Mom." "Good morning, my son. Did you sleep well?" "Better than in the last 15 years. During breakfast, Jennifer appeared at the door. She seemed more relaxed than the day before. "Good morning, Michael." "Good morning, sis. Sit with us." Jennifer hesitated, but eventually joined them at the table. "I came to apologize for the way I treated you yesterday." "You don't need to apologize. You had every right to be angry." "I did, but I went too far. Mom told me a lot last night about how you called at first but couldn't reach us, about the letters you sent the first year." Michael's eyes widened. "What letters?" Mrs. Dorothy got up and went to the wardrobe. She returned with a shoebox full of yellowed letters. "I kept them all. You sent one every month the first year, then it slowed down until it stopped." Michael took one of the letters and recognized his own teenage handwriting. They were letters full of hope, talking about New York City, about plans to get rich and come back home. "Why did you never reply?" Jennifer and Mrs. Dorothy exchanged glances. "We did reply," said Jennifer. "We sent many letters. You never received them." Michael shook his head slowly. A chill settled in his stomach. "I never received any. We sent them to the address you gave in your letters, a boarding house in Riverside Heights. The landlady—" Michael stopped mid-sentence, the realization hitting him like lightning. "The landlady didn't like me. She said I was trouble for being from the countryside." Jennifer covered her mouth with her hands. "Do you think she hid our letters?" "I'm sure of it. This explains so much. I thought you had forgotten me." that you didn't want to talk to me anymore. Mrs. Dorothy began to cry. And we thought you had forgotten us when you stopped sending letters. Michael felt as if a veil had been lifted from his eyes. 15 years of misunderstandings based on letters that never reached their destination. Sis, in the letters you sent, what did they say? That we loved you, that we missed you, that Dad was proud of your efforts, that this house was always open for you to come back. Michael broke down in tears again. If he had received those letters, maybe he never would have sold the recipe. Maybe he would have come back before his father passed. There's no use thinking about what could have been, said Jennifer, hugging her brother. What matters is that now we know the truth. For the rest of the morning, Michael visited the village accompanied by Mrs. Dorothy. Many residents greeted him politely but still kept their distance. Others remained clearly hostile. At the school, he met Mrs. Thompson, who had been his elementary school teacher. "Michael Reynolds," she exclaimed. "My, how you've grown!" "Mrs. Thompson, you haven't changed a bit." "Liar, I'm full of white hair and wrinkles. But you've turned into such a distinguished man. Only on the outside, ma'am. Inside, I'm still the same insecure boy from before." She studied him carefully. "I heard you brought money for the village." "I brought what was rightfully ours, nothing more." "And I also heard you want to stay." "I do, if the community will have me." Mrs. Thompson smiled. "You know, Michael, I always believed you'd come back. Not in the way you did, but that you'd return." "Why?" "Because those born here, who grew up breathing this air and drinking this water, can never completely break free. The village stays in our soul." Michael nodded. She was right. Even during his most successful moments in New York City, something was always missing. In the afternoon, Robert sought him out. "Michael, I need to talk with you." "Of course. About the meeting tonight." "That too. But there are other things. Come with me. I'll show you the village's problems." Robert took him to see the current reality of Palmview Village. The school urgently needed repairs. The health clinic operated only twice a week with a nurse. There was no basic sanitation. The main road became impassable during the rainy season. "With the money you brought, we can solve some of these problems," said Robert, "but not all." "What do you suggest?" "Your idea for the cooperative is good, but it needs to be well planned. Having money is no use if we don't have the management skills." Michael realized Robert was testing his sincerity and competence. "You're right. That's why I want to stay, to help build this from the ground up in a sustainable way." "And if it doesn't work? If the cooperative fails, will you leave again?" Michael stopped walking and looked into his old friend's eyes. "Robert, I understand your distrust, but I'm not leaving. No matter what happens, this is my home now." "How can I be sure of that?" Michael took a key from his pocket. "This is the key to my apartment in New York City. Tomorrow morning I'm calling a real estate agency to sell it. I'm transferring my car to the association's name. And I'm canceling my private health insurance to use the clinic here." Robert took the key and examined it. "This proves nothing. You could have another apartment, other assets. You can come with me to the bank to verify. I have nothing else besides what I brought. I spent almost everything in recent years hiring lawyers to recover our revenue." For a moment, the two men stared at each other in silence. Robert seemed to be measuring Michael's character. "You know, I always hated you for leaving," Robert finally said. "Not because you left, but because I wanted to go too and didn't have the courage." Michael didn't expect this confession. "You wanted to leave the village?" "Of course I did. What young person doesn't want to see the world? But I was the oldest son, my father was sick, my mother needed me. So I stayed, and I resented you for having the courage I lacked." "Do you regret staying?" Robert looked around the village. "Sometimes yes, sometimes no. I built a life here. Married Sarah, we have 2 children. I'm respected in the community. But I always wonder what it would have been like if I had tried." Michael put his hand on his friend's shoulder. "Robert, you've done much more for the village than I have. You stayed, took care of the community, kept things running. I just ran away from the problems. Maybe, but now you're here. And if you really stay, we'll work together. We will. if you'll have me. As dusk fell, the entire village gathered at the school for the assembly. Michael had never seen so many residents together. Men, women, elderly, young people, children. Everyone wanted to hear what he had to say. Robert, as president of the association, led the meeting. Folks, everyone already knows why we're here. Michael Reynolds came back after 15 years and is proposing some changes for our village. Before we vote on whether to accept him back into the community, let's hear him out. Michael stood up. He felt all eyes on him. Good evening, everyone. I know many of you are angry with me, and you have every right to be. I left young, full of dreams, and it took me 15 years to return. In that time a lot happened, many people suffered, and I wasn't here to help. Some people nodded, others remained impassive. I didn't come here to ask for forgiveness, because I know some things can't be forgiven. I came to try to fix what I did wrong and build something better for all of us. Old Mr. Jenkins stood up. Michael, you talk pretty, but how do we know you won't leave again when things get tough? Because I've already experienced the best life has to offer out there, Mr. Jenkins. I had money, professional success, a luxury apartment, and I discovered that none of that is worth anything without family, without community, without roots. A young woman raised her hand. But what if your cooperative doesn't work out? What if we lose the money? Ashley, right? Michael remembered the girl who had been his sister's classmate. The cooperative might work, or it might not. That depends on all of us. But the money is already in the association's name. Even if I leave tomorrow, it still belongs to you. Miss Elizabeth, leaning on her cane, asked to speak. Folks, I've lived 86 years. I've seen this village grow. I've seen it decline. I've seen people leave and others arrive. One thing I've learned, someone who comes back after so long and gives up money out of love for the community isn't lying. A young man of about 20 spoke up. But Miss Elizabeth, we can't just trust him because he brought money. What if he wants to run the village, make decisions for all of us? Michael looked at the young man. What's your name? Brandon. Brandon, I understand your concern. That's why I propose that decisions be made by the association. I want to help, not run things. If at any point you think I'm overstepping, you can remove me from the cooperative. Professor Wilson, the school principal, raised a practical question. Michael, you talk about developing the village, but how exactly? What are your specific plans? Professor, with Miss Elizabeth's recipes and the settlement money, we can set up a small natural products factory. Syrups, ointments, teas, first to sell locally, then expand to other cities. And who will work at the factory? Asked Ashley. Everyone who wants to. The idea is for it to be a real cooperative. Each family can have a share in the profits. Jennifer stood up. I'd like to speak. Everyone turned to her. My brother made many mistakes. He abandoned the family, sold our tradition, disappeared for 15 years. But he came back, and he didn't come back empty-handed. He brought back what was ours, and is offering much more. She paused. I was angry with him too, very angry. But our mother taught me that family forgives, and if family forgives, community can forgive too. Mrs. Dorothy asked to speak. My friends, you know my story. I worked my whole life in this village. I saw my husband leave without seeing his son return. I cried many nights thinking I had lost my boy forever. Her voice broke. Now he's here. Changed, yes. More mature, more responsible. But he's still my son, and a son who comes home deserves a chance. The silence that followed was broken by Robert. Let's vote. Who is in favor of accepting Michael back into the community and supporting the cooperative project? Michael closed his eyes. His heart was beating so hard he thought everyone could hear it. Slowly hands began to rise, first Mrs. Dorothy and Jennifer, then Miss Elizabeth. Old Mr. Jenkins raised his hand, followed by Professor Wilson and Mrs. Thompson. One by one, more hands went up. Not all, but a clear majority. Who is against? A few hands were raised, including that of Brandon, the young man who had questioned Michael. The motion is approved, announced Robert. Michael Reynolds is officially back in Palmview Village. Michael felt tears streaming down his face. 15 years of guilt and regret had finally found redemption. Dear listener, If you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just getting started. Now, continuing. In the days that followed, Michael threw himself headfirst into organizing the cooperative. Together with Robert and Miss Elizabeth, they began cataloguing all the village's traditional recipes. These weren't just the creations of his great-grandfather William, but knowledge accumulated by generations of residents. Miss Elizabeth proved to be a true living library. Beyond the 4 recipes for natural remedies, she knew formulas for healing ointments, natural repellents, and even a special soap made with local plants. "My brother always said that nature gives us everything we need," she shared during one of their cataloguing sessions. "You just need to know where to look and how to prepare it." Michael took detailed notes of every ingredient, every measurement, every process. This time, nothing would be lost. "Miss Elizabeth, are you sure you want to share all this? This knowledge is a treasure." The elderly woman smiled. "My boy, what good is a treasure that's locked away? Knowledge that isn't passed on turns to dust, along with the one who holds it." Meanwhile, Robert handled the legal and bureaucratic aspects. He discovered that creating a cooperative involved much more paperwork than they had imagined. "Michael, we're going to need permits, health licenses, registration with the commercial board, and it's a lot. I can help with that. I have contacts in New York City who can speed up some processes." Jennifer took on the task of mobilizing the village families. Each household needed to decide if they wanted to participate in the cooperative and how. "Some people are still hesitant," she reported to Michael. "They think it might be too good to be true." "And those who opposed it at the meeting?" "Most are watching to see if you'll keep your promises. Only Brandon remains truly against it." Michael had noticed the young man Brandon's persistent hostility. He decided to seek him out for a frank conversation. He found Brandon working in the makeshift mechanics shop next to the school. The young man was fixing an old bicycle and pretended not to notice Michael's arrival. "Brandon, can we talk?" The young man continued working without looking up. "I have nothing to say to you." "But I have a few things to say to you." Brandon finally looked at him. "Go ahead, but it won't change my mind." Michael sat on a wooden bench. "Why are you so against me coming back?" "Because you're not trustworthy. You show up here after 15 years full of promises and money, and everyone forgets that you abandoned your family." "You're right to be suspicious. But may I ask why it bothers you so much? You must have been, 5 years old when I left?" Brandon stopped working. "I was 7, and I remember you. You remember me. I remember the day you left. My mother cried because you were an example for the young people in the village. 'Michael is going to be somebody in life,' she used to say. 'He's going to come back a doctor and help our people.' Michael began to understand. And when I didn't come back, my mother lost faith. She said that if not even Michael, who was so clever, managed to do well, imagine the other young people in the village. Does your mother still think that way?" Brandon lowered his head. "My mother passed away 2 years ago. Diabetes, just like your father. She also didn't have money for the medicine." Michael felt a punch in his stomach. Another person who had suffered while he was away. "Brandon, I'm so sorry. I don't want your pity. I just want you to understand why I don't trust you. You left once when things got tough. You'll leave again." Michael stayed silent for a moment. "Can I tell you something?" he finally asked. "Something I haven't told anyone else." Brandon made an indifferent gesture, but Michael noticed he was listening. "I tried to come back 3 times in the first 5 years." "What do you mean?" "I bought a bus ticket 3 times. I even made it to the bus station, but I always gave up at the last minute." "Why?" "Because I was scared. Scared to admit I had failed. Scared to disappoint everyone. Scared I wouldn't be able to help my family." Brandon looked at him curiously. "And now? Aren't you scared anymore?" "I'm very scared. Scared that the cooperative won't work. Scared that you'll reject me again. Scared I won't be able to honor my father's memory." "So why did you come back?" Michael smiled sadly. "Because I found out that the fear of trying is smaller than the fear of spending the rest of my life regretting." Brandon went back to tinkering with the bicycle, but Michael noticed his posture had changed slightly. "Even if you stay," said Brandon without looking up. "How do we know you won't try to take over everything? That you won't become a little boss here in the village? Because you won't let me. And if I try, you'll take me down." "How?" "The cooperative will have bylaws, clear rules. No one can make decisions alone. Besides, Brandon, I learned something in New York City. Power without responsibility always ends badly. Here I have a responsibility to all of you." Brandon stopped working again. "You talk pretty, but talk is easy." "You're right, that's why I'll prove it with actions. And if I can't convince you, at least I'll respect your opinion." On the way back, Michael ran into Mrs. Thompson. "How did the talk with Brandon go?" she asked. "How did you know I went to talk to him?" "My boy, small village, no secrets. Besides, it was obvious you two needed to talk. He still doesn't trust me. And he's right. Trust is earned, not demanded." "Do you think I'll manage?" Mrs. Thompson stopped walking. "Michael, do you want an honest answer?" "I do. I don't know, you came back different, more mature. But life here is different too. The village has changed over the last 15 years. Some people left, others arrived. The young folks think differently from the old ones. Do you think the cooperative can work? It can, but it will depend on much more than good intentions and money. It will depend on unity, persistence, and the ability to adapt." Michael nodded. "And will you help me?" Mrs. Thompson smiled. "I'm already helping. I'm giving you honest advice instead of just telling you what you want to hear." 2 weeks after the meeting, the cooperative began to take shape. Michael used part of the money to buy basic production equipment. They weren't industrial machines, but enough to start on a small scale. The old school shed, which had been abandoned, was turned into the first headquarters of the Palmview Village Cooperative. Miss Elizabeth supervised the production of the first batches of elderberry and honey syrup, teaching every detail of the process to a group of interested women. "You have to stir always in the same direction," she explained patiently. "If you change direction, the syrup won't be smooth." Robert took care of the commercial side, establishing contacts with pharmacies and natural product stores in the area. "I already have 3 pharmacies interested in buying our syrup," he shared excitedly. "If the product is truly good, they want to place regular orders." Michael divided his time between helping with production and handling administrative matters. He was learning that managing a cooperative was very different from working at a company. "Everyone wants to have a say in everything," he commented to Jennifer. "In New York City, the boss decided and that was it. Here, any change has to be discussed with the whole cooperative." "And does that bother you?" "At first, yes. But now I see that it's better this way. Decisions take longer, but once they're made, everyone understands and supports them." The first big test came when the first batch of syrup was ready. Robert had scheduled a visit from the pharmacist from the neighboring town to evaluate the product. Dr. Anderson arrived in the village on a Thursday afternoon. He was a middle-aged man, serious and professional. He carefully examined the cooperative's facilities and tested the syrup. "The product is good," he finally said, "but it needs some improvements in packaging and labeling to meet health regulations." Michael took note of everything. "How long do we need to make these adjustments?" 1 month, if you dedicate yourselves, and I'll need all the cooperative's documentation to formalize the supply contract." When Dr. Anderson left, the cooperative went into emergency mode. Everyone worked day and night to meet the health requirements. Brandon, who had kept his distance until then, showed up at the warehouse on a Saturday morning. "Can I help?" he asked without ceremony. Michael looked up from the computer where he was organizing the documentation. "Of course. We need all the help we can get." "What can I work on?" "You understand mechanics, right? See that machine over there? It has an engine problem." Brandon went to the machine and examined it. "It's just a dirty air filter, easy to fix." While Brandon worked, Michael took the opportunity to talk to him. "What made you change your mind?" "I haven't changed my mind. I still think you might fail." "Then why are you here?" Brandon stopped working and looked at him. "Because even if you fail, the cooperative can't. A lot of people are counting on this to improve their lives." Michael smiled. "It's a start. It's just a start indeed. Don't think we're friends now. I don't, but I appreciate the help. By the end of the month, the cooperative had managed to meet all of Dr. Anderson's requirements. The first contract was signed, 50 bottles of syrup per week for 3 pharmacies in the region. It's not much, said Robert during the cooperative meeting, but it's a solid start. Miss Elizabeth, who was now officially the production supervisor, made sure to give her opinion. My brother William always said, slow and steady wins the race. It's better to grow little by little than to try to fly too high and fall. The cooperative's first months were a constant learning experience. Not everything went as planned. There were batches that didn't turn out well and had to be discarded. There were problems with suppliers. There were internal discussions about priorities and decisions. It's normal, Michael explained during one of the weekly meetings. Every new business goes through these difficulties. The important thing is to learn from mistakes. But not everyone was convinced. Some members began to question whether the project would really work. We've already spent almost $50,000 and still haven't made a profit, complained Mr. Harrison, one of the oldest in the village. How do we know we won't lose all the money? Michael showed the financial control spreadsheets. Mr. Harrison, it's true we haven't made a profit yet, but we also haven't had a real loss. The money was invested in equipment and improvements that remain with the cooperative. But when will we start seeing some return? If we keep up the current pace, by the 6th month we'll have enough revenue to distribute the first profits among the cooperative members. Professor Wilson raised an important question. Michael, what if the syrup doesn't sell well? What if people don't like it? That's why we're starting slow. If the syrup doesn't work out, we try another product. Miss Elizabeth knows recipes for ointments, soaps, repellents. And if nothing works, insisted Mr. Harrison. Michael took a deep breath. It was a question that haunted him during sleepless nights. If nothing works, at least we tried, and the money left over will still belong to the cooperative to try other things. Robert supported Michael. Folks, remember that a year ago our village had no prospects for growth. Now we have a real chance to improve our situation. It's worth the risk. The discussion went on for 2 hours, but in the end the majority decided to keep investing in the cooperative. In the 4th month of operation, something happened that changed everything. Dr. Anderson called Robert with an unexpected proposal. Robert, can you increase syrup production? It depends. How much do you want? 200 bottles per week. I have a client who wants to distribute the product in Baton Rouge. Robert nearly dropped the phone. 200 bottles? That's 4 times what we produce now. Can you do it or not? Robert looked around the warehouse. With the current setup, it would be impossible. We'll need more equipment and more people. How long do you need to get organized? 2 weeks? Perfect. I'll confirm with my client and get back to you. When Robert hung up, everyone in the warehouse was looking at him. So? Asked Michael. I think our lives just changed. The news of the increased demand spread through the village in just a few hours. Suddenly, people who had kept their distance from the cooperative showed up interested in joining. Now everyone wants in, Jennifer commented with irony. Where were they when we needed help setting everything up? We can't think like that, sis, said Michael. The cooperative is for all village residents. If more people want to join, it's a good sign. But Brandon, who had become a regular helper at the cooperative, disagreed. It's not fair to those who worked from the beginning. These people will join now and get the same share of profits. It was a complex issue. Michael called a special meeting to decide how to handle the situation. Folks, he began, we have an opportunity to grow much more than we planned. But to do that, we need more cooperative members. The question is, how do we integrate new members fairly? Robert proposed a solution. How about creating participation categories? Those who've been here from the start get a higher percentage of profits. Those joining now start with a lower percentage, and it increases based on their time of participation. The proposal sparked heated debate. Some thought it fair, others considered it discriminatory. Miss Elizabeth asked to speak. Everyone, you're complicating something simple. What matters isn't who joined first or last. What matters is that everyone works for the good of the village. But, Miss Elizabeth, argued Brandon, Those who worked from the beginning deserve recognition. And they will have recognition, through the community's respect, through the satisfaction of a job well done. But we can't create divisions between neighbors over money. Michael noticed the discussion was getting too tense. Let's do this. I'll propose 3 options and you vote. First, we keep the cooperative closed only for current members. Second, we open to new members with different shares based on length of service. Third, we open to everyone with equal shares regardless of when they joined. The vote was close, but the second option won by a narrow margin. In the 2 weeks that followed, the cooperative underwent a radical transformation. New equipment was purchased, more people were trained, and production quadrupled. Michael found himself working 18 hours a day, organizing the expansion. He was exhausted, but also exhilarated. For the first time since he had returned, he felt he was truly making a difference. "You need to rest," said Jennifer. "There's no use working yourself to death." "I'm fine, sis." "No, you're not. You look like you haven't slept in days." Michael looked at himself in the mirror for the first time in weeks. Jennifer was right. He had deep, dark circles and had lost weight. "It's just that there's so much to organize. The cooperative isn't just your responsibility. Delegate more tasks to other people." "But what if they mess up? And what if they do well?" "You have to trust people, Michael, just like they're trusting you." Jennifer's advice made Michael reflect. He was repeating a pattern he had learned in New York City, trying to control everything himself. But the cooperative was different. It was a collective project. The following week, Michael began to delegate more responsibilities. Robert took over the commercial side completely. Miss Elizabeth trained 3 other women to supervise production. Brandon became responsible for maintaining all the equipment. "How does it feel to be less indispensable?" joked Jennifer. "Much better than I expected," admitted Michael. "And the cooperative is running even better without me trying to control everything." The first big test of the new structure came when Dr. Anderson showed up with an even larger order. "My client in Baton Rouge wants 300 bottles a week, and there's another client in New Orleans interested in 200 more." Robert did the math quickly. 500 bottles a week? Boys. That's 10 times our original production. "Can you do it?" This time it was Miss Elizabeth who answered. "We can, but we'll need another month to get organized." Michael was surprised by the elderly woman's confidence. "Miss Elizabeth, are you sure?" "I am, my boy. It's not just you running after everything anymore. Now we're a real cooperative." And she was right. In the following months, the Palmview Village Cooperative became the main source of income for the region. The elderberry and honey syrup won over customers all across Louisiana, and other recipes from Miss Elizabeth also began to be produced. The success brought visible changes to the village. The streets were paved with part of the cooperative's profits. The school got a complete renovation. The health clinic started operating every day with a doctor hired by the Residents Association. "It feels like we're living in a different village," commented Mrs. Thompson. "The village is the same," replied Michael. "We just discovered our potential." But it wasn't all smooth sailing. The success also brought unexpected problems. One morning, Michael was approached by a man in a suit who introduced himself as a representative of a pharmaceutical laboratory from New York City. "Mr. Reynolds, I've come to make a proposal for your cooperative." "What kind of proposal?" "We want to buy the syrup formula and the brand. We're offering $2 million. Michael felt an uncomfortable déjà vu. It was almost the same situation as 15 years ago. "Thank you for the offer, but we're not interested in selling." $2 million is a lot of money, Mr. Reynolds. Divided among the members, each family would get about $40,000. "The answer is still no," the man insisted. "Think about it. You're a small cooperative with no structure to compete with big laboratories. Sooner or later, someone will copy your formula and you'll lose the market. If that happens, we'll deal with it then. Now please leave." When the man left, Michael called an emergency meeting to tell everyone what had happened. $2 million? Exclaimed Mr. Harrison. "That's a lot of money." "It sure is," agreed Michael, "but it's not ours to sell. The recipe belongs to the family, to the village, to future generations." Brandon spoke up. "But what if they really copy our formula? What if we lose everything?" Brandon, 15 years ago I sold our recipe because I was afraid of missing an opportunity. Result, we lost the recipe and gained nothing. I won't repeat the same mistake. Robert supported Michael. He's right. Our strength isn't just in the recipe, but in the quality of the product, the trust of our customers, our organization as a cooperative. Miss Elizabeth tapped her cane on the floor. My brother William created these recipes to help people, not to make some laboratory rich. Anyone who sells to these sharks will have to step over my dead body first. The assembly decided unanimously no recipe would be sold. 3 months later, the laboratory representative's prediction came partly true. Products similar to the cooperative syrup appeared on the market, sold by big companies. They really did copy our formula, said Robert worriedly, and they're selling it cheaper. Michael studied the competing products. They copied the base of the formula, but it's not exactly the same. It's missing Miss Elizabeth's special touch. Even so, they're competing with us. Our sales have already dropped 20%. It was a critical moment for the cooperative. Some members began to question if they shouldn't have sold the formula when they had the chance. Maybe we should rethink our strategy, suggested Professor Wilson. Competing with big laboratories isn't easy. Michael called a meeting with just the cooperative's coordination team. Himself, Robert, Miss Elizabeth, Jennifer, and surprisingly Brandon, who had become a key part of the organization. Folks, we have 2 options. Either we try to compete in the same market as the big laboratories, or we create our own niche. What kind of niche? Asked Robert. Handcrafted products, made with care, with regional identity. Instead of trying to be a big company, let's be the best natural products cooperative in Louisiana. Miss Elizabeth smiled. I like that idea. That's right. Quality over quantity. Brandon, who had become more involved, made an unexpected suggestion. What if we also invested in tourism? Lots of people would like to see how our products are made. Rural tourism? Asked Jennifer, interested. Why not? The village is beautiful. We have an interesting story to tell, and visitors can even buy our products straight from the source. Michael was impressed with Brandon's growth in thinking. That's a brilliant idea. We can create an itinerary that includes a visit to the cooperative, lunch with local food, a production demonstration. Robert was already doing the math. If we can bring 100 visitors a month, each paying $50, that would already be considerable extra income. The new strategy was presented at the General Assembly and approved enthusiastically. The cooperative would also transform into a rural tourism project. The following months were intense preparation. Part of the shed was adapted to receive visitors. Mrs. Dorothy and other women from the village created a menu of regional dishes. Michael organized a training course for anyone who wanted to work as a guide. Each of us needs to know how to tell the story of the village, the cooperative, the recipes, he explained during the course. Visitors don't just want to see products being made. They want to hear stories, to feel like they're part of something special. Brandon proved to be an excellent guide, combining technical knowledge about production with a natural charisma for dealing with people. Who would have thought that angry young man would become one of our best collaborators? Commented Jennifer. People change, sis. I've changed. You've changed. Brandon has changed. Life forces us to grow. And you? Do you regret coming back? Michael looked around the village that had transformed so much since his arrival. Never. Best decision of my life. The Rural Tourism Project was officially launched a year and a half after Michael's return. The first tour brought 40 visitors from New Orleans to experience Palm View Village. Michael watched nervously as Brandon led the group through the cooperative, explaining each step of the elderberry and honey syrup production. Miss Elizabeth demonstrated how to prepare the mixture, sharing stories about her brother William. At the end, the visitors had lunch at Mrs. Dorothy's house, tasting dishes that couldn't be found in any big city restaurant. How would you rate your experience? Michael asked at the end of the day. Wonderful, replied a lady from New York City. It's been years since I felt so welcomed. You've preserved something very rare. Authenticity. We'll definitely be back, said a young couple. And we'll bring our friends. When the tour departed, the cooperative had sold more products in one day than it usually sold in a week at pharmacies. I think we've found our calling, commented Robert with satisfaction. In the following months, Palmview Village became a sought-after destination for rural tourism in Louisiana. Newspaper and magazine articles shared the story of the cooperative and Michael's return. The project won awards for sustainable development and social innovation. "I never imagined our little village would become famous," said Mrs. Thompson. "Aye, famous for the best reasons," Michael replied, "for showing that it's possible to develop a community without losing its roots." 3 years after his return, Michael was approached by representatives from universities and non-governmental organizations interested in studying the Palmview Village model. "You've created something unique," said a professor from Louisiana State University, "a cooperative that combines family tradition, economic development, and cultural preservation." "We want to replicate this model in other rural communities," explained a representative from Small Biz Support. "Could you provide consulting for other projects?" Michael consulted with the cooperative before responding. "We can help, but with one condition. Any consulting we provide will be in the name of the cooperative, not mine, and the earnings from this will go to a village development fund." The proposal was unanimously approved. The Palmview Village Cooperative also became a reference for rural development training. On a Sunday morning 4 years after his return, Michael walked through the paved streets of the village. He watched children playing in plazas that had been built with cooperative funds. He saw young people who, instead of leaving for big cities, now worked on local projects. He greeted elderly residents who had access to regular medical care. "What are you thinking about?" asked Jennifer, who approached him. "I was thinking about Dad. How happy he would be to see all this." "I think he is seeing it, bro. And he's proud." Michael smiled. "Sometimes I still feel guilty for taking so long to come back. And I sometimes feel ashamed for doubting you when you arrived, but what matters is that we're here now, building something together." They walked in silence until they reached the village cemetery. Michael hadn't visited his father's grave since returning, not for lack of desire, but because he still felt too much pain. "I think the time has come," Jennifer said understandingly. Mr. Edwards' grave was simple, but well maintained. There were fresh flowers, placed by Mrs. Dorothy during her weekly visit. Michael knelt and placed his hand on the headstone. "Hi, Dad. I know I took too long to come here. I took too long for many things, actually. But I wanted you to know that I made it. I made it back home. I managed to help our people. I managed to honor our family name." Jennifer placed her hand on her brother's shoulder. "He always knew you would." "How could he be so sure?" "Because he told me. In our last conversation he said, 'Jennifer, our Michael will come back, and when he does he'll do great things.' I thought it was just the illness talking, but he was right." Michael cried for the first time since he had visited the grave. They weren't tears of sadness, but of relief. He had finally made peace with his father's memory. When they returned home, they found Mrs. Dorothy preparing Sunday lunch. At 72, she looked younger and more energetic than when Michael had first arrived. "Where did you go?" she asked, without looking up from the pot. "We went to visit Dad," Jennifer replied. Mrs. Dorothy smiled. It was time. He'd been waiting for that visit for 4 years. Michael hugged his mother. "Thank you for never giving up on me, Mom." "A mother never gives up on her child, Michael. It might take 50 years, but a mother always waits." During lunch, Brandon showed up with unexpected news. "Michael, there's an interesting offer for you." "What kind of offer?" "A consulting firm from New York City wants to hire you. $15,000 a month to help other rural communities." Michael nearly choked on his food. $15,000? "That's a lot of money," Jennifer commented. "Almost what you make here in 6 months." Michael looked at Brandon. "And you, what do you think?" "I think you should take it," Brandon surprisingly answered. "What do you mean?" "Michael, you've already proven you've changed. You've done everything you promised here in the village. If you want to grow professionally, you have my support." Michael shook his head. "You all don't understand. I don't want to grow professionally. I want to grow as a person, as part of this community. $15,000 can't buy what I have here." "But it's a unique opportunity," Jennifer insisted. "Sis, I had many unique opportunities in New York City, and they all left me feeling emptier. Here I have purpose, I have family, I have roots. I won't trade that for money ever again." Mrs. Dorothy smiled proudly. "My boy has really grown up." Brandon laughed. "To tell you the truth, I was testing you. I wanted to see if you'd still be tempted by outside offers. And what was the test result? You passed with flying colors." 5 years after his return, Michael was married to Rachel, a teacher who had come to the village to work at the renovated school. They had 2 young children and a simple but happy life. The Palmview Village Cooperative had become the largest job creator in the region. Besides natural products and rural tourism, they had also developed craft projects, beekeeping and organic farming. "I never imagined our village would become a model for the entire country," commented Robert, who was now a state representative elected to advocate for rural communities' interests. "The secret wasn't our village becoming a model," Michael replied. "The secret was discovering that we were always special. We just didn't know it." Brandon had completed a technical course in cooperativism and become the cooperative's main consultant for expansion projects. His transformation from a rebellious youth to a community leader impressed everyone who knew his story. "You know, Michael," Brandon said one afternoon while organizing a new tour, "I need to apologize to you." "Why?" "For being so hostile when you came back." "You were right about everything." Michael shook his head. "Brandon, you weren't wrong to be suspicious. Healthy skepticism is important. It made me work harder to prove my worth. Even so, I could have been more polite. And I could have come back 15 years earlier. We all make mistakes. What matters is that we learn from them." Miss Elizabeth, now 91 years old, continued supervising the production of natural remedies, but had trained successors to carry on her work. "My boy," she said to Michael one afternoon, "you know I won't be here forever." "Miss Elizabeth, don't talk like that. It's life, Michael, but I'm at peace, because I know I'm leaving our tradition in good hands. You've taught so many people. The knowledge won't be lost. Not just the knowledge of the recipes, the knowledge that a united community is stronger than any hardship." One Saturday morning, 6 years after his return, Michael received an unexpected call. It was the same businessman who had tried to buy the cooperative's recipes years before. "Mr. Michael, I'd like to make a new proposal." "We're not interested in selling anything," Michael replied immediately. "Not to buy, to invest. We want to become partners with the cooperative." Michael was intrigued. "How so?" "We've observed your growth over the last few years. We want to invest $5 million to help with expansion in exchange for 20% of the profits." It was a tempting offer. With $5 million, the cooperative could multiply its production capacity and reach national markets. "I'll consult with the cooperative and give you an answer in a week." The proposal sparked the biggest debate in the history of the Palmview Village Cooperative. Discussion sessions stretched for hours, with passionate arguments from both sides. $5 million is a lot of money," argued one group. "We can take our products all across the country." "But 20% of the profits forever is a lot too," countered another group. "And who's to say they won't want to interfere in our decisions?" Michael remained neutral during the debates, letting the community decide. "What's your opinion?" asked Robert. "My opinion is that you should decide without worrying about what I think. This is the cooperative's decision, not mine." Brandon did a technical analysis of the proposal. "Financially, it makes sense, but we need to negotiate clauses that protect our autonomy." Miss Elizabeth, as always, brought her perspective of wisdom. "My children, money is important, but autonomy is even more important. If we accept, it has to be with very clear rules." The final decision was to accept the proposal, but with significant modifications. Instead of 20% of the profits forever, it would be 15% for 10 years. And it was established that no strategic decision could be made without approval from the Cooperative Members' Assembly. "You drive a very hard bargain," commented the businessman when the terms were presented. "We don't drive a bargain," corrected Michael. "We run a community that also does business. It's different." With the investment, the Palmview Village Cooperative expanded beyond the most optimistic expectations. Products from the village began to be sold in supermarkets across the country. The rural tourism project received international visitors. The cooperative's story became a documentary film and the subject of academic books. But for Michael, the greatest success wasn't in the numbers or the external recognition. "You know what I'm most proud of?" he said to Jennifer one afternoon. "What?" "Seeing that no young person from the village has to leave here to have a future. They can choose to stay and build a dignified life, like we chose. Exactly, like we finally learned to choose." 8 years after his return, Michael was invited to give a lecture at a university in New York City about community development. It was ironic to be back in the city that had given him so much and taken so much away. In the audience, he recognized some faces of old co-workers. After the lecture, one of them approached him. "Michael, I never imagined you'd drop everything to become a, how should I say it, rural activist." Michael smiled. "I didn't abandon everything, Anderson. I found everything. I found my true calling." "But don't you miss life in New York City? The energy, the opportunities?" "I miss some things, yes, but I don't miss the existential emptiness I had there." "Existential emptiness? You earned well, had a promising career, and I had no peace. I had no real purpose. I worked to earn money to buy things I didn't need to impress people who didn't like me." His former colleague shook his head. "I think you romanticize country life too much. And I think you underestimate the value of community too much. But that's fine, everyone makes their own choices." On the plane back to New Orleans, Michael reflected on the conversation. He felt no superiority nor regret, only gratitude for having found his place in the world. Upon arriving at the village, he was greeted by his children running toward him. "Daddy!" shouted Emma, 5 years old. "Grandma Dorothy taught us how to make syrup." "And I helped Uncle Brandon fix the machine," said Edward, 3 years old. Michael hugged his children and looked at Rachel, who waited for him at the door of their home. "How was the trip?" she asked. "Enlightening. It confirmed I made the right choice." "Did you have doubts?" "No, but it's always good to be sure." That night, after the children were asleep, Michael and Rachel walked through the village. The lit streets, the renovated houses, the activity of the cooperative running 3 shifts showed a reality very different from what Michael had found 8 years earlier. "Sometimes it feels like a dream," commented Rachel. "Sometimes it feels like it was always this way," replied Michael. "As if this prosperous village always existed and I just needed to return to see it." "Do you think everything would have worked out if you had come back earlier?" Michael thought about the question. Maybe not. Maybe I needed to go through everything I went through in New York City to appreciate what I have here. Maybe the village needed to go through hardships to be ready for the changes. Philosophy of destiny. Philosophy of gratitude. Whatever the reason, I'm grateful to be here now. 10 years after his return, Palmview Village celebrated the 10th anniversary of the cooperative. Residents, former residents, business partners and officials gathered for the party. The mayor of the neighboring town gave a speech praising the development model created by the village. "The Palmview Village Cooperative proves it's possible to grow economically without losing cultural identity. You are an example for the whole country." Brandon, now president of the cooperative, thanked everyone on behalf of the community. "Our success didn't start with money or technology. It started with a young man who had the courage to return home and ask for forgiveness. And it continued with a community that had the generosity to forgive and the wisdom to build together." Everyone looked at Michael, who was sitting with his family in the front row. "Michael Reynolds," continued Brandon, "on behalf of all of Palmview Village, thank you for coming back. Thank you for insisting when some of us doubted. Thank you for showing us that our village was always special." Michael stood up, moved. "Brandon, everyone, I'm the one who should thank you. Thank you for giving me a second chance, for believing that people can change, for teaching me that true success is when the whole community prospers together." Mrs. Dorothy, now 80 years old, asked to speak. "My children, I saw this village be born, grow, go through hardships, and be reborn. I learned that family isn't just those who share the same blood. Family is who stays together in hard times and celebrates together in good times. Palmview Village is one big family." The party lasted until dawn. There was music, dancing, local food, and many stories told and retold. Michael watched everything with a smile on his face. He thought of the insecure boy who had left decades ago in search of success. He thought of the lost man who had sold the family tradition out of desperation. He thought of the successful but empty businessman he had become in New York City. And now he was there, surrounded by true family, being part of something bigger than himself. He had found not just success, but meaning. "What are you thinking about?" asked Jennifer, sitting next to him. "I was thinking that it took me 40 years to understand what really matters in life. And what is that? Belonging, making a difference, leaving the world a little better than we found it. Do you think you've managed to do that?" Michael looked around the party, saw children running between the adults, young couples courting, elders telling stories, whole families celebrating together. "I think we've managed it. All of us. Together." End of story. And what did you think of this journey of redemption and transformation? Michael's story shows us that it's never too late to come home, ask for forgiveness and start over. That true success isn't measured just by what we achieve individually, but by what we build together as a community. Tell us in the comments, do you believe people can really change? Have you ever had to ask forgiveness for a past choice? Your opinion is very important to us. Don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other heartwarming stories like this one. Until next time.